Welcome to the second episode of Dinosaur News of the Week for the 27th of August to the 2nd of September. Coming up, the Chicago specimen of Archaeopteryx is discovered to have the same sorts of specialized feeding systems as modern birds. A new genus of crocodilomorph from Argentina is described and named. Hang on a minute, this is supposed to be Dinosaur News of the Week, that's not a dinosaur. And new fossils show that the oldest ankylosaur is also the spikiest. First up, let's start with some news that technically happened last week. A new Chinese eusauropod named Huashanosaurus Jinyou was described and named on the 26th of August. It was found in the early/middle Jurassic Wangmen formation, and its name means Jiangqi's Huashan mountain lizard, named after the person who found it and the region it was found in. Now for the first of the larger stories. A study on the Chicago Archaeopteryx specimen reveals that it had many of the same feeding apparatus as modern birds, showing that all of these features evolved very early on in the evolution of birds, with Archaeopteryx now being the oldest dinosaur known to have had all these specialized feeding organs. Foramina on the front portion of its beak showed that it would have had a built-up organ, which is a region of the beak filled with nerve endings that can sense pressure changes in the air. This allows modern birds to sense animals they cannot see, including potential prey. This fossil also includes some pits in a palate, which are indicative of having oral papillae, as well as an ossified base hyal, which indicates that it also would have had a mobile tongue. Since modern neognath birds use the oral papillae in combination with their mobile tongues to maneuver food down their throats more easily, it's likely that Archaeopteryx did the same. The authors also suggest that these new creatures evolved in tandem with Archaeopteryx being able to fly, as flight is a very physically demanding form of movement for vertebrates, which means that Archaeopteryx was needing to increase caloric intake to be able to fly. The authors noted that Microraptor also has an ossified base hyal. Since Microraptor could definitely glide and may have been able to fly, it is possible that Microraptor convergently evolved this creature alongside Archaeopteryx for the same reasons that Archaeopteryx did. Also, for anyone wondering about parade and phylogeny after last week's video, this paper has an even more bizarre cladogram. The Hausgoraptorians are recovered as new dromaeosaurs, the Microraptorians put into their own clade that is separate from Dromaeosauridae and also more basal than either dromaeosaurs or troodontids, and the Yanchiornithines are classified as troodontids. This is likely due to the fact that the paper is comparing much fewer characteristics, with a particular emphasis on their rostral anatomy. Now, there wasn't enough dinosaur news this week to make the lightning round as long as it was last time, so this will just be a short segment, which I guess is more accurate to what a so-called lightning round should be. A paper published in the journal, the Anatomical Record, on the 25th of August, described the internal structure of the vertebra of the hadrosaurus Huallasaurus and found that it lacked all evidence of invasive pneumaticity in the bone. However, the internal structure was most similar to Silosaurus, further supporting the hypothesis that the avian respiratory system exclusively evolved in Saurischians and not Ornithischians. On top of this, the similarity between Huallasaurus and Silosaurus could lend more credibility to the recent hypothesis that Silosaurus are a grade of primitive Ornithischians, as opposed to the previous hypothesis that they were just closely related to dinosaurs, but not themselves dinosaurs. And on the 2nd of September, Jurassic Evolution 3 uploaded a new creature showcase video, showing off Tropiognathus. I know it's not a dinosaur, but Jurassic Evolution 3 is a dinosaur-themed game, so it gets a pass. Which revealed that pterosaurs will have walking animations and social animations in the new game, which the community was complaining that they lacked in Jurassic World Evolution 2. In addition, the online Jurassic World Evolution 3 database was updated, which revealed that Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus will be in the game, with male and female variants as well as babies. It is unclear if the more accurate original design will also be in the game at the moment. And now for a news segment which I've created purely because there's been almost no dinosaur news this week, the non-dinosaur news of the week, where we look at news about the animals that most frequently confuse dinosaurs but actually aren't, with the 5 candidates being pterosaurs, marine reptiles, non-mammalian synapsids, pseudoseuchians, or literally anything else. This week it's pseudoseuchians. On the 27th, a new genus of terrestrial croc, more accurately a pyrosaurid notosuchian crocodilomorph, was described from the late Cretaceous Chirrillo formation of Argentina, meaning it lived alongside the largest megaraptorid, Micromacrothorax. It's been named Costansuchus atrox, which means harsh wind crocodile. It's estimated to have been between 2.7 meters and 3.5 meters long and roughly 250 kilograms, which also makes it the largest pyrosaurid. It also shares many similarities with the Bauersuchids, which were also hypercarnivorous terrestrial notosuchians. However, the two differ in that the hind legs of Costansuchus appear to have a more sprawling posture, possibly for a more semi-aquatic lifestyle, and its skull is wider, not as long, and not as deep. Also on the 2nd of September, a new genus of Gracillosuchid named Taihangasuchus wuxiangensis was described from the Middle Triassic Minhang formation of China. And now for the final piece of news. On the 27th of August, new fossil material of the ankylosaur Spikiest was described. This Ankylosaur is not only the oldest Ankylosaur, being between 168 million and 161 million years old, but it's also the only Ankylosaur known from Africa so far, coming from the Elmer's 3 formation. The original holotype was just a single rib, which was complete enough to be recognised as belonging to an Ankylosaur when it was described and named in 2021, but also distinct enough to be recognised as a new genus, having the osteoderms forming spines that grew from the ribs. This made the original interpretation of Spikiest look somewhat like those weird dinosaur toys with the big mouths. However, this new paper describes more skeletal remains from Spikiest that was discovered in 2023, which showed that Spikiest was covered in incredibly long spines all over its body. On top of this, the spikes at the tip of its tail seem to show some sort of fusion, similar to what is seen in the later club-bearing Ankylosaurs, whose tail clubs are made of larger fused osteoderms, despite the fact that it doesn't have a tail club. This paper also suggests that, despite their intimidating appearance, these spikes likely evolved in such a way for display. Later Ankylosaurs have much simpler armour, implying that the primary function of Ankylosaur armour changed over time. This does not mean that the spikes were purely for display, as these could seriously injure any predator. As you may have noticed, this video is much shorter than last week's and the audio is significantly terrible because I've had to do most of the editing process and the recording process without access to my laptop, so I'm using CapCut Mobile instead. That's all for the news this week. Bye for now.